as a result of commercial logging, mining, dams, industries, urbanization, and all the processes relating to that, the demands that we're making, increasing demands we're making on nature and natural resources, etc. So it's a massive impact, and what is very important to remember is that this impact is not just an impact on, let's say, the tiger and the elephant, which is important enough, but also that most of India's population, unlike you and me, is dependent directly on natural resources for their livelihoods. You would have seen that in Self-reliance and Kutch, those of you who went, or you would have seen that in the northeast, where there is a direct dependence on the local river or the local forest or the local grasslands or small fields for virtually everything that you need in life. It's not, there isn't a mall there where you can go and buy things, right? So this, any impact on the environment is also a direct impact on these people. That's the kind of connection that is very important to keep remembering. In 1991, the current Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was then Finance Minister, brought in a whole series of what was called economic reforms. And this was essentially a very massive shift in the economic policies of the government, which till now, if you look at it from independence till 1991, a lot of focus was on trying to build India's economy internally, try to be self-reliant, and there were a lot of problems with that, massive problems, lots of environmental destruction and other things also. So I'm not saying that was good, but I'm just saying there's a shift away from be self-reliant, trying to address issues of poverty and so on from within our own context and our own resources, to saying, well, let's actually open up the economy to a global marketplace and focus much more on not building self-reliance, but actually doing things like trade, much greater trade with other countries, opening up the economy for others from outside to invest, so foreign investments, move away from public sector to the private, so things like public services or production of goods, or even things like water services and so on, actually move them gradually from the public sector into the private sector. These are the 3 or 4 major kinds of changes that have been taking place, and I'm not going to go into detail in this very complex situation. We've done it in the book in quite a amount of detail. But essentially what we then looked at is to say, okay, from 1991 to now, the kind of, let us say, environmental damage and people's livelihood loss and so on that was taking place prior to 91, has that changed in some way? That become worse, less, worse, better, etc. And what we find is that actually 91 onwards, the situation becomes that much worse. Because of all these phenomena, there is a much greater impact on the environment and on people. And again, let's just take a quick look at some examples. So if you want very rapid industrialization, and you want to invite both big Indian corporations and multinational corporations from outside, then you need to make it easier, right? You need the environment, I mean the financial environment or the investment environment needs to be made simpler. So one of the things that has been happening is, both from within the government and the pressure from agencies like the World Bank, is to simplify a whole lot of the procedures that were required for setting up an industry. So amongst those procedures were, of course, environmental procedures. And if you've seen just one act, the Environment Protection Act, which came in 1986, under that we had a series of notifications for conserving the environment or for dealing with the environmental impacts of development projects. So for instance, we had the Coastal Regulation Zone notification which said that India's coasts are extremely fragile and they are crucial for the livelihoods of tens of millions of people who live along the coast. So many different kinds of industries, mining, etc. should not happen there, or should happen under strict conditions. And similarly, we had an environmental impact assessment notification which said any development project that has to be set up in the country above a certain scale should go through some procedure looking at the environmental impacts and then trying to see whether the project should be built.